Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Mindsets podcast. Today I'm going to be joined by another guest, a Paralympian, a world champion cyclist, and a man with many stories to tell about how he's transitioned from different classifications, all while having an impairment. Before we get into the episode though, I want to make you aware of Samaritans. You may have heard of the Samaritans before, however, they offer a mental health service that not enough people take advantage of. It's completely free and it's available 24/7. You can call them on 116 123, or you can email them at joe@samaritans.org. That's jo@samaritans.org. They don't currently have an online web chat service, but they are working on that as hard as they can. The Samaritans won't give you any unsolicited advice. They're mainly there to listen and help you get through any of your struggles you might be having. Without further ado, let's get into episode 3 of the Mindsets podcast. Welcome back. So today I'm joined by Sam Ruddock. Better than me trying to explain anything about who you are. I assume you know a lot better. I said that in the last episode as well. So go ahead. Who is Sam Ruddock?
I would hope I know more about me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to struggle. So Sam Ruddock is a professional track cyclist.
Yeah.
As of count of last year when I came on to UK Sport Funding. But for the past couple of years, I've been amateur, but working as a mentor in schools.
Yeah.
So now fully professional, and that is where I spend most of my time training and competing for Great Britain, the Paris cycling team specifically.
So quite a big sort of role there. A lot of people may have already heard of you. Some won't necessarily have done.
Big time.
There's different levels to the cycling. I've been and looked through some of the cycling events for the Paralympics and for the World Champs. There's different categories. I know there's letters attached to them. I know there's numbers attached to them. Is there a way that you could sort of translate that for myself and other people that may be watching or listening?
So that's one of the things about Paralympic sport, is that from a spectator's perspective, you have to understand what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is around understanding and representation through classification. So every different para sport has a different classification system, which doesn't help from a spectator's perspective, but they're trying to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
No pun intended. So in cycling, it goes C is the first letter. So C meaning cycling.
Yeah.
Obviously. And then you've got from 1 to 5. So 1 is the most severe impaired class. So those are the athletes that are primarily really affected in their legs. They could be missing a limb, both limbs, mainly in the legs, or there could be a neurological impairment there, like mine, which is cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
So you've got that. So they're the most impaired riders, and it goes all the way up from 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 5 is the least affected riders. So those are riders with, say, clubfoot or talipes, or maybe they're missing only one limb. So they're attached. So one part of them is fully attached to the bike at all times. But for all intents and purposes, they're able-bodied. They don't have any impairment that would restrict them neurologically or fatigue them as quickly as, say, my disability would. So that's why they're in a higher class, and I'd be in a lower class.
Okay, so in your class, you obviously cerebral palsy is a condition that you're born with. Mm-hmm. In your class, you don't have any crossover with people that have a disability that they have gained at some point in their life or anything like that.
There is certainly potential for that. So when I was in athletics,
yeah,
and I competed as a 35, which again is the most severe class that athletes can compete standing up. So they're ambulance. So I competed against athletes that had acquired their cerebral palsy at a later date through either a stroke or an accident. And naturally, they're going to be more able than I am in terms of their physical capabilities, because they have full muscle development, the neuro pathways are probably better developed than mine are, because mine's congenital from birth. So there'll be restrictions there, but not as much as what I would experience. So naturally, they're going to have an advantage over me because they've acquired their cerebral palsy, whereas I was born with mine. So that's what a lot of people. If you dip right down into the classifications, there's certain nuances there that can explain why one athlete is better than the other.
Right. Okay. So there's even though there are those classifications, there's still some extra stuff in there, extra stuff that can happen.
But I've spoken with a bit of a tainted view about parasport at the minute. There are genuine cases of where there are there are genuine athletes in the sport, and they're winning, and they're doing what they're doing because they are an athlete. Because despite their impairment, they still train just as hard and dedicate themselves just as much as any other athlete would, and they're winning because they deserve to win, not necessarily because they're more able than their opponents.
So, okay. With sport in general, though, obviously you've got your classification now that you're at that competitive level. When you were younger and we're sort of going right the way back to being a kid, did you have any interest in sport, or has it been a more recent sort of adulthood kind of thing? How did it all sort of start?
It was a very late development. I didn't really start playing sport regularly until my teenage years. At school, it was mainly like football. Put the jumpers down, play football in the playground. Now, because of my cerebral palsy and how it affects my legs, to kick and run at the same time is quite difficult because that requires a lot of neuromotor control. So doing two things at once is very, very difficult. But I could be a decent keeper because all I had to do was like move from side to side, jump one way, dive the other way, and I could use my hands. So I was a better keeper at school than I was playing like out front, maybe as a striker or a midfielder. And as a result of that, I gravitated more towards basketball in when I was 14, 15. And then from 16 onwards, I went to a different school, and rugby was the prevalent sport. So that's where I started playing contact sports and more basketball and more cricket. So I kind of threw myself into everything that I could, but it was mainly a way to unwind and relax from studying. It wasn't, and just to keep my mind healthy. It wasn't really a way to ascertain and acquire a career.
Right. So it being sort of quite a relaxed, like you said, it was a bit of an escape from sport and stuff. I used to do the same when I remember getting home from school. I used to kick a ball in my garden for hours. I used to go and throw a tennis ball at a wall. I obviously but played for my sports teams and stuff like that. Did you find it difficult to integrate into those teams as a young kid with cerebral palsy?
Sometimes, but I think I also enjoy playing team sports because I was able to mask my own inabilities versus my friends and kind of blend into the background and contribute where I thought I could, or where I was comfortable to and able to. Whereas in an individual sport, for example, like sport, I hated sports day athletics, which is ironic because my first Paralympic Games was in athletics. But I hated athletics because it was very obvious that when it came to running, jumping or throwing, I was always going to finish last because no one else had the disability that I did. So the individual sports I stayed away from, and the team sports I gravitated more towards for that reason.
Did you find that was a way because you could find your specific strength? And obviously in team sports, you need a variation of strength rather than having to manage everything yourself, where it could be more of a challenge for you.
Yeah.
Because as you have sort of grown up and you've got to where you are now, you've obviously gone towards more solo stuff. What ended up driving you that way? I guess what really took you away from team sport to going into more solo style sport?
I think it's very difficult to get into a team sport on the Paralympic side of things, and unless you've been in the sport for a very long time and have experience and skills within that sport. So let's say wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, those are a lot of the team sports and Paralympic sport are seated events. And I've worked incredibly hard on my body. My mum did when I was little. We did loads of physio in the NHS. Like so much work has gone into me to make me as able as I am today, despite having cerebral palsy. That for me to sit and compete in a team sport, I think would just be the biggest slap in the face to everything.
Right.
Everything. It's everything that's ever been invested in me. I think it just wouldn't be the right thing to do. Now, even though I sit on a bike, that's very, very different to a wheelchair sport. So I think that's probably why I like to take the elements of team sport into individual sport. Something I'm always trying to tell my teammates about. Even though we're individual riders, we are a team. We're Great Britain. We compete as a team, and I'm trying to bring that ethos. What I took from team sports at school and what I took from football. I try and bring that into my processes.
So just briefly, you touched on, because I love that you're able to sort of transfer that, and obviously from what I've met of you, you really try to bring that into everything, and I think that's part of your character. What I wanted to slightly roll back on is you mentioned you had a lot of physio as a kid. Do you think that, I'm struggling to think about the impact that it could have. Is it a negative impact because you feel like you needed all of this physio as a kid, or do you feel it built a foundation for you to sort of trust your body and you know what your body can do as a result of it?
It's hard to know because my physio through child development stopped when I was around 9-10 years old, so it didn't continue late into my. So I guess I used sport as physio when I grew older and when I was a teenager. But I vividly have stories being told to me by my mum that, you know, I'd be sat on the floor with the physio, and because my knees were always like inwards and they'd literally be stuck together, it's quite common with cerebral palsy. The idea was to kind of stretch them out, flex them out, and get the hip flexors and get the adductors working, and that required them being pulled apart, often with physical force, which is going to cause a lot of pain and a lot of tears. Yeah. So you've got to be sat there as a parent thinking this is physically hurting my child, but there are times where I wanted to stop it from happening, but I knew it was going to be for your benefit, so I let it happen. And those are stories that she tells me quite often. So I knew it would benefit you in the future. And I talk so much about parents and schooling, and the idea of helicopter parenting. You know, the idea that you can't, you know, you need to be there by that child's side all the time, 24/7. But they need to learn lessons for themselves sometimes, in the right circumstances with the right supervision, which is no different to the coaching here at the university. It's no different to players have to learn lessons about what will happen on the field in the right environment, in a controlled situation, and they have to learn that for themselves. So I think that's something that I've learned from that experience.
So you've obviously just moved onto coaching, which is now quite a big thing for you. For those watching this, Sam is currently wearing a Loughborough Aces hoodie. Do you want to reference how you got to the Loughborough Aces, who the hell they are, and what sort of stepping stone that might have been?
So I played a lot of Madden on my Xbox, as a lot of people did, and that's often how they get into the sport. So it was basketball first, and then I thought, let's buy the other. No, it was ESPN 2K. 2004 ESPN 2K. So it was, but there wasn't 2K. It was just ESPN. So it was ESPN basketball, then ESPN football, and ESPN ice hockey. I bought them all. I thought, let's just learn the rules of these games through playing through sports. And I came across football. And the more I played it, the more I realized Donovan McNabb was on the cover. So that's why I'm an Eagles fan, because I was like, oh my god! And Allen Iverson was also on the cover of the basketball one as well. So Philly was obviously running things in 2003, 2004, showing my age now. But yeah, it was through playing that sport that I started looking. And at that time, I was doing A levels, and I was looking at my UCAS, my Section 10, and thinking, where do I want to go to uni? Now, I was born in rugby. Went to school in rugby, and I was looking at places that had strong politics departments but also decent sport, because I wanted to carry on playing sport regularly. So Loughborough was my first choice and Warwick was my second choice. Now, thankfully, I didn't end up playing for the Warwick Wolves, thank God, otherwise we wouldn't be in this situation. However, I remember sending an email to the head coach at the time, Jason Scott, who's now head coach at Nottingham, saying, I've played Madden, I'm interested in playing football, can I get involved? And back then, the sport was not as popular as it is now, even though, you know, people still watched and played football here, but nowhere near as popular as it is now. But that's how I got into it in my first year. Went to the AU Bazaar like everyone else does, came along, and one of the massive linemen, James Roberts, said, oh, you look pretty athletic. Do you want to join the team? And no one ever called me athletic in my life before. So that was a big ego boost, and it just kind of went on from there. That was in 2009. That's when the team was still called the Loughborough Aces before they were rebranded as Loughborough Students in 2013, I think.
So it's a similar timescale, because I seem to remember one of your first F35 competitions, at least that I saw on the internet, was still in the early teens or the early 2010s. So for you to have been at that level in terms of Paralympic sports and that sort of thing, how did you transition away from American football? Or was it there were two going on at the same time?
There were two going on kind of two going on at the same time. So I was talent spotted, as it were. It's almost like a combine setting. So we were doing our 40-yard dash and 3-cone drill, L drills at the high pack. And Joe McDonnell, who's the sprint coach, who is now the head of para sprints at Loughborough, he was there training his own coaching group. And he came up to me during the 40s and said, "Oh, you look pretty quick. Like, I've noticed you've got cerebral palsy." And no one, again, it's first time experiences. No one ever said you look pretty quick. And secondly, no one ever seen that I had the disability that I had, because I'd not always tried to hide it, but tried to make less of it. Like, I tried to just see me as an all human being that just enjoys the sport. But he actually pointed out and said, "You're quick and you have cerebral palsy, so we can put these two things together and let's consider parasport, let's consider sprinting." This was in December of 2011, so we targeted the Paralympics. We started sprinting. Our first race was at the Charnwood Open in Loughborough, April 2012. But I was still playing football then and still trying to graduate. So for about 6 months during that year of 2012, I was doing both at the same time. And then when the football season finished, I graduated effectively finished exams in May. That's when I essentially went full time into sprinting, and that's what led to the London 2012 games in August.
Sounds pretty hectic for a student to sort of deal with.
Yeah.
We've both been students. Yeah. I'm aware that course-wise, there are times where the work itself is a lot. When you're juggling one sport, that's a lot, because you're also, if you're trying to be at a good level, you're obviously probably devoting some of your time to the gym as well. How are you handling gym how are you handling gym alongside training for two sports and being a student?
So to be completely honest, gym wasn't really the focus. My gym regimen was nowhere near what it is now. I only really started getting into the gym because of football. We wanted to make our team. I remember, so my first ever gym program was a program called West Side for Skinny Boys, but it's a different name, but we'll call it Boys for now. Joe DeFranco, one of his programs online, which was forwarded to me by a guy called Adam Hope, who played running back for Loughborough, and was probably one of the best I've ever seen run the football. But anyway, he was the guy that drove a lot of us into the gym in my second year of playing football. So that's when I started to get acquainted with strength conditioning and tune the body for specific events. But it really, a lot of the time, there wasn't really a focus. And despite all of this as well, I forgot I was still working as a bar supervisor at the SU. So every Friday night I was on my feet from 7 till 3 in the morning, checking out tills. Back then we still used cash at the SU.
So there's never been a desire to have any sort of free time?
No, I have a pathological need to be busy, whether it's to my detriment or to my success, I don't know yet, but it's something about me that everybody loves and hates, I would say. It's something I need to look at in greater detail.
Do you think that might be part of the reason that as you started, you did track, right? And then you went into field events. Was that through wanting to try some other stuff because you might have been at the track anyway, had a bit of spare time, or was it actually, I think I'm more of a powerful athlete when it comes to my upper body away from the track? Is that what the transition was, or was there just an interest?
That was a push from the coaches within the para team to go into where we would have the most impact, essentially. So the sprinting was working, but the classification was moving forward incredibly quickly. To put it into context, my PB over the 100 metres is 13.75, and the world record at that time was 12.3. So that's the kind of difference in impairments, whereas the gap was much closer in shot put and throwing, and they knew that I had a strong upper body, but the common misconception around throws, around any events, so whether it's a drive in golf, or whether it's a pitch in baseball, or a punch in boxing, or even a shot in cricket, it all comes from the hips. Everything is led from the hip through that drive train, through the ankle and the hip and the knee, and everything just finishes off with the hand. So it's the same with discus, shot, hammer and javelin. Everything comes from the lower body and is extended by the upper body. But they did say that you'd have more of an impact being a thrower than you would being a sprinter. So that's how that transition happened. And it was difficult because, again, that was a change in training. That certainly was more gym focused because it's all about power over a short space of time. Most throwers in the Olympic Games and Paralympics, to their credit, can body anybody over 20 meters, even a sprinter to some extent. But any distance after that, they start to fall off because obviously they're not sprinters. But in terms of power to weight ratios over that very short distance, they can handle their own. So that's kind of the transition. That's why it made sense to transition from sprint into throws.
Did you find it difficult to transition from I'm a fast person and that's what I train for, to hold on a minute, I need to stop. I need to stop, first of all, the way I train. I need to change the way that I sort of approach my training around it, because obviously with running and sprinting, I'm aware from some sprint coaching that I've had that it feels like it uses all of your body. To now you're doing power movement, so you're short and fast in your training, but you're really focusing on the output of that throw. How was that sort of side of things?
No, you're absolutely right, because there's long repetition in throws. Like you're throwing the thing 60, 70 times in a session. So it's incredibly repetitive, which can be quite mind-numbing at some point, especially if you're not having a good session. And what you said about outcome is incredibly true as well. Like if you go into the throwing circle trying to get a distance, you'll completely forget about the process you need to follow in the circle to achieve that distance. And you can, the visual feedback that you get is instantaneous. Like you know where that shot's landed, so you have to deal with that on the next throw. So it teaches you to have a short-term memory, a next play mentality. You've got to throw the thing and go, okay, it didn't go as far as I wanted to, but if you keep focusing on it too much, that's when sessions can really start to go wrong, because you come on, I want to go further, and you keep trying hard, and trying hard in throws is just the complete reverse opposite of what you should do. You need to be relaxed, in control, and powerful. There's a very fine line between being aggressive and being relaxed, and you have to find that in throws, because if you don't, your sessions could be absolutely awful. So yeah, it's a completely different kind of train. Whereas in sprints, yeah, you've got a coach stood there with the watch and stopping your splits, but it's nowhere near as impactful, let's say, as you actually seeing the result after every single throw. So you've got that's a challenge that you have to manage.
Bad sessions are pretty normal, I think, and that's something that in sport generally, experience comes from understanding that sometimes things aren't always perfect. You ended up taking your shot put to having a British record, came second in the European Champs in 2015, and then you went to the Olympics and competed in Rio and came sixth. How you clearly dealt with the bad sessions to get to that point. What was the process that you ended up finding worked for you to take you from someone that occasionally has these bad sessions to all of a sudden you're at the top of the world, effectively?
The silver medal at Europeans was kind of a rubber stamp moment, and the year previous to that I'd gone to world champs and thrown a PB, the first ever thrown in my life, which was again 13.75. So I got the same PB in the 100 and the shot. It's weird how life works that way. It's fate. But with the throwing, what it came down to was just relaxing and trusting the training, trusting the sessions that we put in. And in actual fact, when it came to Rio, that was a absolutely horrible experience, like overall, because my body was in the fittest shape it had ever been to, and everyone's going to shout cliche when they hear this, but it's generally true. Like my mind wasn't ready for those games, not in any way, shape or form. My head was at home, and my body was on the plane going over to our holding camp, and I went into the circle, and I saw the shot not going as far as I wanted it to, and I checked out before we even made it to the Paralympic final, through a metre less than my PB. My brain just wasn't in that state. Same thing happened again the following year, London 2017. Like I was so ready. I was in great shape. I put on so much muscle. My skin folds were down. I was in incredible shape. I was good to throw. But again, my mind was just so on fire, and I could not switch it off. I couldn't learn how to relax it, how to train it, how to keep it relaxed to allow me to compete. But those experiences in 2016, 2017, I think, and again in my first Worlds in cycling, those things had to happen for me to have the approach that I have now to my training and competition.
Firstly, I want to apologise for interrupting the podcast. However, this will be a very brief message. I wanted to give you some extra information about another service that the Samaritans offer. They have a self-help app online. All you need is your email address to sign up, and again, it's completely free. The app will offer you the ability to track your mood daily and then spot patterns in how your mood may change through the week. We do this with our physical training anyway, where you track your training and you're always seeking to improve, but we don't tend to do this with our mental health. It's something that we should start doing so we can start to continue this state of improvement, both with ourselves physically on the side, but then mentally as well. They also offer some safe procedure planning. In the event of a crisis, it's important that we make sure that we mitigate all of the risks we can have on ourselves. And we can make a list within the app that then allows us to stop these things happening in the event of a crisis. Without further ado, let's get back into the episode. Let's get back to Sam and continue to hear about his story. So, having mentioned some of the struggle you had with your mind being at home, Do you liken that almost to this imposter syndrome, where you didn't? I don't know if you've heard of that phrase. I mean, I've heard a few people deal with when they get to a certain stage, they just feel like they are there and they know they're there, but they don't feel like they should be there, kind of thing. Was it partly that?
I think it was there was a little bit of imposter syndrome in that. I had that alone in 2012 anyway. Like just being given the kit for the first time, and I didn't understand the gravitas of what I'd actually achieved until after the games, and I saw the parades in London. I thought, I've just gone to the highest level of our sport, and we were hosting. Like that will never happen again in history. And I managed to make it there in less than 9 months of training in a sport I knew absolutely nothing about. Like by rights, I had no right to be there amongst those athletes. You know, Johnny Peacock, David Weir, Hannah Cockcroft, Alan Davies, Richard Whitehead. The list goes on and on. Like incredible athletes in their own right, and had every Stephen Miller as well. Like every right to be there. And I just kind of I learned to embrace it, but for a long time, I think what helped me deal with that was this idea of me allowing myself to be a part of that family. And when I say part of that family, I mean part of a family that is disabled. Essentially, like we're disabled. We're Paralympian, yes, but we're disabled. And now I tick, that box when in like CVs or questionnaires. Do you have a disability? Do you have an impairment? I used to tick no for a very long time, and now I tick yes because I feel like by being part of this world, I've now accepted part of me for who it is. So that imposter syndrome lessened and lessened, but it was still there at the World Champs in 2020. Like I went to my first Worlds after a year of cycling, and up until that point, I'd raced on the track. I competed on the track twice. At my third ever kilo time trial was at the World Championships in Canada. That was in January of 2020. So even there, I thought to myself, at times I thought, what am I doing here? I'm about to compete for Great Britain in another event, in another sport, and I've done this a grand total of twice. It was just absolutely insane. But the phrase "fake it till you make it" rings has a lot to answer for. I think. Yeah.
I like that. With the sort of what we discussed with what happened when you did shot put and you went to those Olympics and you didn't really achieve, I think, what you were aiming for. Like you said, you ended up going to cycling. Was that, again, another coach-driven thing, or was it an interest for you? Because, again, we've gone from transitioning from track to then being all-powerful in quick movements. Then, hold on a minute. I mean, you know what a bike is, but racing a bike, I can imagine, is completely different. And you've effectively got to start again, kind of later on into your athletic career. What drove that?
Well, we always do a lot of cross training on the watt bike anyway,
right?
Through athletics, whether for conditioning and for low impact work as well. So if you sustain an injury, you can still keep your conditioning and your cardio up without actually impacting your joints. So cycling on the watt bike is really, really good for that. I went back into team sports between shot and between cycling. I tried cerebral palsy football. Mm-hmm. So that's a 7-a-side game. Really, really good fun. Just standard Sunday league stuff. Having a kickabout with the boys. Like it was really, really good fun. That was for Derby County and their cerebral palsy football team. That was really good fun. I did that for a year. Still staying in the gym. I still trained like a performance athlete in the gym. But when it came to technical work, my football, I kind of just let that be and let that come as it did naturally. And then I went to a UK Sport Talent Day. That was on campus. I was at Loughborough, but we used that. My coach and I used that as an excuse to get some free numbers. So count, movement, jump, the watt bike test, all the tests that they did, and they basically test you and put you into a sport. So okay. I did the watt bike test, and Phil Hogg, who at the time was the head of para triathlon, who I'd met in Rio, said, "Sam, I know you can run because I know who you are. You just ran the hell out of that watt bike test. That was insane. How do you feel about swimming?" I'm like, "Phil, I don't swim. I'm sorry, I'm not about to do triathlon." But then John Lenton came up to me, who was the head of paracycling talent, and he said, "Look, these numbers look really, really good. If you fit into classification we think you're going to fit into, there's a very good possibility that you could be really competitive at the level. But we don't call us, we'll call you, basically. Okay. And you need to do these tests again in Manchester to prove it wasn't a fluke. But at this point in time, it looks promising, and that was in, I want to say December 2018, January 2019. that's when the conversation happened.
So it went pretty quick from a conversation to, obviously, last year in 1 minute 13.8, 02, something like that. You bagged yourself a nice shiny thing to hang around your neck.
Yeah, it's bad, bro.
You're the world champion at the moment for men's C1 2022. It was
2022 last year's world champs. Kilometre.
So how was your preparation for that event different to, obviously, the previous event was you'd ridden a bike twice. Probably isn't ideal going into a competition. No, but for previous events that you had done for some of the other sports, how did you approach this differently? Was it a more experienced take, would you say?
Yeah, I think a lot more experience went into that 1 minute 13 effort. And I also think just trusting the work that had been done up until that point previously. Again, finding the fine line between being relaxed and aggressive, because obviously in a start, you've got to start a bike from the gate. And you want to be really, really strong and powerful in that start, but you don't want to try too hard that you forget the process of going into the kilo. In effect, is essentially it's a 4-lap race, but the first lap, the standing lap, is absolutely everything. Like you it's not you don't need to get that absolutely spot on, but I like to tell myself that I can and I will, rather than need. I think there's two very different ways to approach that. If you tell yourself I need to do this, it puts unnecessary pressure on you, and then the outcome for it, if it doesn't go the way you wanted it to, you think, well, I needed to do it and I haven't done it, so now that's considered a failure. Whereas if I think to myself, well, I can do it and I will do it, if the outcome doesn't go the way you do, well, at least you tried, and there's now room to move forward. Whether the idea of needing to do something produces the outcome that could be a failure that you can't move out from. So from all the conversation that we had around the start and preparing for the race, and not focusing too much on the time, like the outcome of it. Like I remember speaking to our psychologist that came up with us in Paris, and he said, "Sam, how do you feel about the race?" Like, I feel good. I'm fine. I'm relaxed. Everyone would ask me as well, "How do you feel about the race?" Like, leading into it. Like, how do you feel? It's like, please don't gas me. Like, don't rile me up now. I don't need to be fired up now. Like, I'm calm, I'm relaxed. Let me be calm, let me be relaxed. Because in Rio 2016, in London 2017, I went to sleep, replaying like the big throws, like the big performances over and over and over again in my head. And when it came to the actual event itself, I was mentally exhausted because I've taken myself through that process repeatedly. I had nothing left to give. So naturally, I saved that juice, that mindset for practice, for actual practice efforts on track. And when it came to the actual event itself, I was like, "Sam, how do you feel about the race?" Like, I'm fine. I'm relaxed. But literally up until the 20 minutes before I step onto the turbo to do my warm up and put my music in, that's when I start to get ready. And everyone says, "When are you going to be ready for the race?" I'll be ready when I get in the starting gate, when the beeps go. 3, 2, 1. That's when I'll be ready. Up until that point, because that's when I need it all for. Don't bring me up to the boil, but before then, the same thing we do in game day with pre-game. Like when we do game day prayer and things like that, I like to keep the guys relaxed. Everyone has their own routine, but I like to keep the guys relaxed because you don't need the juice 50 minutes before kickoff. You need it as we're going into kickoff. And I think that balance between being mentally ready but being physically ready and not over, essentially it's overtraining. You're overtraining your brain when you're taking it through those processes. I generally believe that. So I just trusted the thought process I was going through as approaching those championships, is to say, I'm relaxed, I'm calm, and most importantly, I need to enjoy this. Because if I relax and I enjoy the feeling. I enjoy the feeling of being ready and performing. When you're relaxed and you're happy, you perform at your best, rather than putting pressure on yourself to, I need to do this and I need to do that. The process of it is something that should be enjoyable. And I knew that if I follow the process of that, if I get my start right, get my transition right, the rest of the race will take care of itself, because I've trained really hard for this and I trusted my training. So a lot of that comes through trusting the training, being relaxed, and also remembering to enjoy it, like have fun, because that's half the reason. You know, if we weren't having fun, we'd have given up ages ago. So that's something you always have to consider. Long answer.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because what I'd love to know, and I'll give you a little context to this. This is far more simple in comparison to competing at a world championship. But yesterday, I went to the gym and I had in mind that I wanted to get a personal record on overhead press. Mm-hmm. I went into the gym, and the adrenaline was already sort of going, because I knew it was the first exercise I was doing, and it was all happening too soon. Like, I needed to get changed. I'd just come from work. All of this was going on, and I was thinking, God, well, I hope there's a squat rack free, although it wouldn't be the end of the world if there wasn't one, because then I could just do this next week. But all of that was going on, and I got there, I calmed myself down, I was able to do it. But what are your relaxation techniques? Because it's natural to start thinking. How do you pull yourself out of it?
So again, I had a really good conversation with the psychologist at World Champs, and he asked me that question. I told him that before I go to sleep at night, I have these. I visualize so hard that I'm in that start gate. I can hear the crowd. I can hear the beeps. I do it. I was like, so what do you do when you asked me saying the question? What do you do when you visualize that and you gassed yourself up? And said I acknowledge it. I acknowledge it. I acknowledge it for what it is. I realize it. I take account of my breathing. I listen to my heart rate, and I put myself back in where I physically am, rather than
become present.
Essentially, yeah. Again, another cliche, but I put myself back where I physically am, and take stock of my breathing, my heart rate, and where my body is, and said, look, you'll be fine. And again, rather than I should be doing this or I should be doing that, like you should be sleeping. You know, like the night before a major event, it's like I should be getting sleep. I need my sleep. It's like, again, it's that idea of I need to do this, and then you start getting angry and upset and frustrate yourself because you're not doing what you should be doing. So again, it's just changing the way you speak to yourself in that moment and go like, just get some sleep. You'll be fine. Just chill. And you have to go through that process of putting yourself back in the room at least 3 or 4 or 5 times, even 10 times in a night. You'll do it, and then eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll start to relax and fall asleep, or you'll start to relax and be able to bring yourself forward to what you need to do. So I think yeah, it's being present in that particular moment. You got to take yourself out of the unpredictable future.
Do you find that you almost like, obviously not physically, although you might be, you end up sort of talking to yourself as if you were a third person to sort of, hold on a minute.
The rock says.
That person that's freaking out right now, while that is you need to stop doing that because there's no benefit of it. So you end up sort of just reminding yourself as if you were another person. It was your friend sitting there that's freaking out. Do you find that's sort of what you're doing? Yeah. It's just not verbal.
Yeah, it's less. It's not me like pulling myself away and there's like a ghost version of me saying, "Come on, Sam, pull it together." You are separating yourself from that metaphysical version of yourself that's putting yourself in that situation where you want to perform, and just bringing that performance version of yourself back into your physical self and go, look, there's a time for you to be together, work together. Now is not this time. Like, it's going to keep separating. It's going to want to keep going over there and putting yourself in the future, because that's part of the body's natural defense mechanism. Ultimately, at the end of the day, but when you're nervous or scared or anxious about anything, the body wants to defend itself, and that could be a mechanism that it goes through in order to prepare itself for what happens next. The coping mechanism is bringing that metaphysical, that ghost version of you that's anxious about what's happening next and trying to prepare for it. Just bring that ghost version back within you and go, look, we need to work together on this. We can't work separately. Again, it's a team game between your mental self and your physical self. One can't work without the other.
Yeah. In terms of, like, you talk about the anxiety as well. One of the more interesting questions I have for you is, after you became world champion, did it boost your confidence to now you know you're world champion, you think of yourself that way, or, and it's happened in my case, I won a couple of things when I was in school, and then come the next competition, I would be absolutely bricking it because now there's a target on my back. Yeah. Do you have that same sense, or have you just turned it into complete fuel, like, I want to retain this, or is there some anxiety in there as well?
I wouldn't say it's anxiety. It does add fuel to training sessions because and you do kind of put the target on your back and think people now want to take this from you, and that can be a source of motivation. People are coming to reaffirm their status as an athlete, and it's obviously very extrinsic. You know, there's gold, silver, and bronze. Like whatever medal you get, people can see your worth and your value. And people have asked me already in lead up to these World Championships this year and gone, Sam, but like the defending world champion. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I am defending the title, but if I go in there trying to defend the title, I'm not going to have a good performance, because I'm thinking about the outcome, and that's something that I physically cannot control. I can control my race. I can control the process I need to follow to put down the best race that I can. I can't control who's going to win the medals. Like, as far as I'm concerned, about PRs and PBs, if I focus on trying to race the best race that I can, I'm going to give myself the best chance of winning a medal, bronze, silver, or bronze. Best chance of defending the title. That's why I want to give myself the best chance to do that. I'll even say that to the guys before we. I don't want to timestamp it, but I'll say that to the guys before we play this weekend. Like, we're trying to give ourselves the best chance that we can to win. There's no guarantee that we will win, but we need to put ourselves in the best situation that we can to actually win. And to do that, we have to focus on the processes of it, like our plays, our alignments, our structures, our our run fits. We need to focus on those things. So yeah, defending the title is something that I keep hearing, and I keep just like batting it away like a forehand, like a backhand down the baseline, because again, it's something that is not within my control, and that's energy that I can't afford to spend on it, because it's not going to be.
If you're using that sort of energy in your training sessions, I would be interested to know what is your training program. Obviously, it's got to be quite specific for cycling now. How does someone that may be interested in getting in cycling, or someone, in fact, with the same disability as you, how do you train?
Sensibly, I think is the best way to say. So today, for example, I had a session that was... so a lot of our sessions are geared towards training certain systems in the body. So today's training was focused on building strength, endurance, and VO2 capacity. So the capacity of your lungs to use oxygen and use it effectively. Right. So you're going to be lying in the zone where you're not producing lactate. That's probably the most rudimentary way to talk about it. So it's obviously working incredibly hard, but you're not seriously putting yourself into a hole in terms of strength training. Whilst combining that for strength training in the gym, for example, I've got one of my heaviest sessions like tomorrow morning, where I'm going to be squatting 5 4s, 3s, and 2s, and then back up again in back squat. So I'm physically a lot stronger than I was this time last year, because of my form has changed drastically, because of very, very subtle changes to my knee, to the way my knees track and the way my ankles track. And again, that's really helped improve my form. So that's really pushed us forward. But the type of training that we're doing at the moment, we'll go more to the road. So we're getting ready for the road. So time trials and road racing, because we're having to double up at the Paralympics, so it'll be less track focused. And as we go more towards the summer, when track season will come upon us, that's when we'll start doing more power work, more speed work. So work that's more suited to those shorter, faster efforts. But if the base is really, really big and you build all the way up to the top of the pyramid is going to be really, really strong, because the base endurance and the base VO2 is naturally going to make me a better rider. For example, I'm going to say this and I'm going to stop, because I know we've gone on for a while. So my kilo at the Derby hit out. So we had a practice kilo before Worlds, a week before Worlds, before we started tapering. Before you kind of shut the body down, you take the training down, you let the body recover more, high quality sessions leading into a World Champs. So we had a hit out, a practice race. I did it in 1:15. So 2 seconds off what I would have done at Worlds, but conditions were affected, etc., etc. My standing lap was really quick, like 22.6, and the midpoint of my race, the mid 500, was probably somewhere in the mid 17s. So we looked at that. Okay, that's fine. That's really, really good. Went to Worlds, had a great time, won the title. Fantastic. Go to Nationals after having a huge block of VO2 training. Go to Nationals this year. I go a second quicker. My standing lap is much slower. So because we've not put the power in, not put the length in, but my mid 500 is much quicker. It's in the high 16s as opposed to the mid 17s. Yeah. So I can now hold that mid 500 for much longer, and the drop off is much slower because of the VO2 base. But what suffered as a result of that is the standing lap, because the standing lap requires a lot of power and a lot of speed, and that requires a lot of torque, which you can only build in the gym through power training. So I had to really wrestle with that in the outcome and go, I'm quicker, but my standing lap isn't as good. So through all these training phases, you have to be at peace with the idea that you're not going to be as good as you are because your training hasn't allowed for it. So you can't get frustrated or concerned, I'm not where I should be. Well, no, you're not where you should be because the training hasn't allowed for you to be there. Yet. That's the key word. Yeah. So again, a lot of it is around trusting the process. And I've had conversations with my coach recently about how bored I'm getting with this VO2 training because I feel like I've plateaued and I've not gotten what I want out of it. But he said, no, you have to keep going with this because if you keep ticking the boxes and keep going through these sessions, I promise you that when it comes to the power and the length and the speed training, you will absolutely fly. Just like stick with me on this and keep going with it because that trust between coach and athlete is something you really have to. You put a lot of trust in a person to bring you to that level. So we've had a few tough conversations, but we've ironed it out.
Do you ever do? I mean, some cheat. I've had some coaches in the past for various things, and they'll write me a plan, and I'll do it. And then, like you said, you get a little bit bored. Do you ever sneak off and do a couple of accessory lifts just to keep it exciting?
Yeah, to sit here and say that I haven't done my own training would be a lie. There are some, but I'm smarter with it now. So I might see a lift or I might see an exercise which I don't really fancy that, but I know which lift or exercise I can go to that's going to give me the same adaptation. So whereas in previous years I just do what I want, but now I realise that the session's been planned this way for a reason. For example, I said to my coach about the VO2 sessions, look, I'm sick of doing like 20-minute efforts. Can we attack this in a different way? So let's do 4 times 5 minutes. Let's do it that way. It's like, please, thank you. Can I have some variety? Like, because we can reach the same goal, just in a different way. So it was to his credit that he was able to see that there's more than one way to reach a training goal or a training outcome.
And you feel like this must be building sort of your knowledge further and further about the way you can train and the way other people might be training just through your coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And also me being a coach as well has only helped enhance that relationship. So when he asks me something, how you feeling, like how's training going, is there anything you want to talk about, or he gives me a program or gives me a particular part of the training, I can respectfully ask him, look, can you tell me why we're doing this way? So I can buy into it. So if I understand it more, I can dedicate myself to the program because I know the reason why it's been put there in the first place. I can have those conversations with him, frankly, rather than as an athlete that's 33 years old, a younger athlete who say in their mid-20s or early 20s feels like they have a coach and they're the be-all and end-all, like they're almost like the god in this situation. And for me to question them would be to not be grateful or not be receptive to the training or not appreciate what's being done. You have to ask those questions. Not necessarily what you do, it's the way in which you do it. And every athlete, I think, should take ownership of their training, take autonomy of their training, like, because it's your career. It's your career at the end of the day. The coach is there as a conduit to help you and guide you and assist you. And to that point, I've never really gotten on well with the coaches that talk about my athletes. Like, right. As if it's a point of ownership.
Yeah.
Like this is my athlete. These are our athletes. Like, my coach Joe was always say, like, I've never done that with our athletes. So everybody feels like they own the ecosystem within which they exist, which is so everybody then is held accountable.
Yeah.
If something were to go wrong or to go right, everyone's then held accountable because you took ownership of your training. I wrote your training. You took ownership of it. If things don't happen, we're both accountable then, and now we can meet in the middle and figure out what went wrong or what went right and how we can improve it.
I like the sound of how much you're absorbing and sort of applying into the coaching that you do now. I'm not at all wanting to say that your career is even close to being the end. You're still quite a young person. You look at all some of the athletes out there now are going into their late 40s. So is the
LeBron in year 20?
Exactly. And do you sort of what's next? Obviously, you've got world champs this year. You're preparing for that. Don't want to distract you from that. I don't even want you to think about planning out your next 10 years of your life. That's not what I'm asking. But have you got sort of a goal of what you want to move into? Is there coaching something really interesting to you, or would you rather stick to what you do now?
Yeah, I would love to coach and mentor as well. I think being part of an athlete services or a game services environment, whether it be a performance director, effectively head coach of a team, would be something that would really interest me. Like I've learned so much in this space, and want to pay it on and pass it forward. So yeah, Worlds this year, Paris for the Paralympic Games 2024. I might think about continuing for another 4 years to go to LA, because the American Games, come on, you don't want to say no to California,
LA, yeah, exactly.
The West Coast Olympic. That's like the World Series, the Super Bowl, NBA Finals all rolled up into one. Like, bro, you can't say no to that. But that is another 4 years of my life that I dedicate to just this one thing. But I think that's what's helped me get through a lot of those difficult times, is me having something else to identify myself with rather than just being an athlete. That's what hurt me so much after Rio. I looked at what I'd done and thought, well, what worse do I have now to anybody? Like, I put all my worth into this thing. Here's the outcome: 6th place finish, 1 meet less than my own PB. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer. Whereas now I've got my eyes in so many different avenues, but I know now how to compartmentalize each thing, so I know when to give each part of it my energy. So now, if I have a bad training day, I'm not gonna pull myself into the hole and go, well, no, you're rubbish. Like, what next? I can go coach. I can go mentor. If I have a bad mentor day, I can go and train. So I now have other ways where I can attribute value and not bring myself down to a level which is going to be detrimental. But that's what the future holds. We'll see. I like to go with the flow.
Definitely.
But I don't. But I know that without structure, my life would literally fall apart.
But you'll find,
and I think a lot of athletes would say the same.
You're using your structure to, like you said, find these other healthy ways to give yourself personal value, which I guess gives you not just refreshment.
It's where a lot of athletes struggle towards the end of their career, even in the middle of their career, when it all comes to an end and they've got a box of medals and this is all I have to show for it. Like, you look back immediately on the feeling of what happened when you won that title, when you achieved that thing, like PB. That's the feeling is the memory. Like guys in the locker room, like those are the memories, those are the feelings that bring you the most joy. But it's not the actual physical thing that you can put on a trophy cabinet or put in a box. It doesn't. It won't bring you any satisfaction. But the memories actually will. So you need to start thinking about making new ones in other ways, so you can get that feeling back of working towards something and being proud of what you achieved.
I can genuinely say that I wish I had this conversation with you years before, and I'm hoping that other people listening to this would get that, because there were times where I've gone home and my mum's gone, oh, look what I found on the stairs, and I just have a bunch of stuff, and at the time they mattered so much to me, and then I look back and I realised that I missed out on a lot of things because I sacrificed some time to do those things, and they didn't really bring me any other pleasure apart from the fact that at that time I had this metal thing that was probably made in a ridiculously cheap condition, and that's what it is. And now, yeah, I look back on it as a fond childhood memory of like, oh, I won this, I did this with this team, but as a kid, I feel like I must have been a bit lost in my identity, really. And I think when you're a teenager growing up and you're really looking for your identity, that's a huge thing to be able to have, is to find other things about you. And sort of, it's not, you shouldn't feel guilty investing time into those. Because in the long run, it can actually have a positive effect on your main focus, like you're having now.
Add value to it.
Yeah, you're getting, you know that when you apply your time to cycling, you can really apply it. And like you said, if you have a bad session, it's not the end of the world, because you can go and have a good coaching session or distract yourself from it and do something else positive with it. I think that's huge. Is there any other huge advice that comes to mind for other people like me or just sort of people that might even just go to the gym a few days a week and they do that to stay healthier? Is there any advice you've learned through your training and your years of experience in competing that you think you'd pass on?
The grind is a myth.
Okay, that's a statement.
The grind is a myth. There's no such thing as the grind. There's a time to grind, and there's a time to not grind. There's a time to there's a time to be 100%, and there's a time to not be. I believe physically, it's impossible to be switched on 100% of the time, and to give you 100% best effort every single session, because there'll be days where you wake up. I mean, I do this for a living, like it's my job. There are days where I wake up, I don't want to go to work. There are days, we all are gonna have days we just don't want to go to work today. And you need to. It's like the 10 spoon concept. Like you'll wake up with like 8 spoons. And going to have breakfast will cost you 6 spoons. You've only got 2 spoons left to spend on the rest of the day. So you need to spend your spoons wisely. So I think think of yourself as an organism that changes and moves and make allowances for it. When you are 100% and you're feeling great, like go for it, like go in and like be on your grind if that's how you feel. If you don't feel it, then cut yourself some slack and turn up as much as you can, but turn up. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like, don't shy away from it. Like people say, the best work is done when you're not feeling it and you go to the gym anyway. That's where the best work is done. Yeah, turn up, but don't drive yourself into the ground when you get there. Like, do what you know you can, rest and recover, and give yourself a chance to get to that 100% mark. Yeah, the grind is a myth. You've got to give yourself time to relax and recover and rest. Like, they can't be 100% all the time, but when you have that chance to be 100%. Go for it, because that's where the best work happens.
I think it's really interesting what you said, something a little while back in our conversation as well, about the fact that you can overtrain your mind, and I think that massively ties into what you're saying there. Is people don't respect the fact that the mind is it's not like a physical muscle, it's an organ, but with your brain, but you can completely overtrain things just by putting too much stress on one particular thing. And I think I'm personally going to take that away, and I will sort of look out for that in my life. If I'm investing too much time into one thing and I'm stressing myself out about it, in fact, I might be doing the complete opposite of what I should be doing. Taking a break is actually a healthy thing to do, and it's okay. I think that's really huge, and I think that'll probably be my main takeaway that I can pull into my life. There's a lot of stuff we've covered there, and I'm really, really thankful that I've had this conversation. Like I said, I wish I'd had it a few years earlier. And I just wanted to sort of, before we round things off, you're having some of those conversations with some younger people, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. So the other work that I do as well as coaching is mentoring. So one part of the mentoring is for the Youth Sport Trust, or a secondary school charity, working in PE and school sport. And the other charity is one called Inspire Plus. They're based in Lincolnshire. Really, one of the most deprived counties in the country, so our work is incredibly valuable in that space. But it's about well-being mentoring, so just speaking with kids a lot about how they're doing, what they're working towards. If they don't think they're working towards anything, is there something that they think they can contribute? And changing out the question around, rather than what do you want to do for a living, because a lot of kids don't have no clue at that age of like from 11 to 16. Like I don't know, they might want to be YouTube stars and drink Prime, but but for the most part, a lot of them don't really know what's going on, because the future and the picture is bleak at the minute. So for them, it's real. So an easier question to ask them is who do you want to be, rather than what do you want to be? Because who do you want to be is an easy question to answer. Like, who do you want to be? What are you like around your mates, your friends, your family? Like, what part of you is valuable in that sense? Because people want that. They want that in their business, whether you're self-employed or whether you work for someone else. They want those kinds of people that know who they are and what they can bring, rather than their skills. You've only got to look at the employment landscape now to know that especially after COVID and lockdown, like the office 9 to 5, that way of working is dead. Yeah. It's dead now. People gravitate towards personable people, not just their skill set, not just what they're bringing, but who it is about them that they're bringing, and how can they enhance the company, enhance the business. So yeah, I think that kind of attitude that kind of talk is really valuable to young people, especially in their journey through education and in some cases out of education, because for a lot of them they're not quite sure where to go next. Yeah, but that's important.
You've mentioned a couple of so it was Inspire Plus, and what was the other one? Sorry?
The Youth Sport Trust.
The Youth Sport Trust. Is there, obviously you've done a massive favour, I'm assuming you're doing a massive favour to them, you've done a massive favour to me and anyone listening here on what you've shared. Is there anything that you would like to plug additionally, even if it's just your own Instagram for people to follow. I mean, some people have been watching and have had the pleasure of seeing your face, but the people that might just be listening, how can they find you? What else can they support?
I think just get involved with the British Cycling Limitless program. So there's that para cycling program, the new program. So if anyone wants to check out that website and just have a little look and see if there's anybody that they know within their own spheres, their own circles that could benefit from a program like the Limitless program, and just be a good human.
Be a good human. I like that. I like that.
Be a good human.
On that note, again, thank you very much for coming on. What I'll say is anyone listening to this, more information about Sam will be appearing on the Instagram page, which is where most of the information comes out at the minute, which you can find at mindsets_podcast.
Follow the pod.
Yeah, follow the pod, please. Share it, get it out there so we can get a bigger reach on some other people. And if you feel like you have a story and you want to come on, this isn't a podcast just for world champions. This is a podcast for anyone, as long as there's a story to tell. So feel free to email. There's a bunch of information probably floating somewhere right now about how you can get in contact, but we do have an email. Obviously, we've got the YouTube where you're watching this, if you are watching. There is a TikTok. I'm not huge on TikTok, but it's pretty much everything that's on Instagram. So if you're in one of those places, you'll see a lot of these updates. So please don't hold back. Feel free to get in touch. And as Sam said, follow the pod and share if you can. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode.